Hello everyone. So today we'll be discussing on the topic indifference curve. So in the previous class we had seen the theory of demand and utility. So based on that we had seen two approaches that were cardinal and ordinal approaches. So here today in the indifference curve theory, it is based on the ordinal utility that we had discussed. So the cardinal utility, we had already said that it can be measured in terms of utils, whereas the ordinal utility, it is ranked based on the preferences of the consumers. Okay, so the ordinal utility was given by Professor Hicks, and thus it is known as the Hicksian approach. So it's a very important thing that has to be noticed, that the theory is known as Hicksian approach. So we'll see what an indifference curve is. An indifference curve refers to the various combination of two commodities that gives the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. So here the important key points would be various combinations of two commodities and the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. So here it's not just one commodity or the same commodity that is giving satisfaction. No, there's combination of two commodities that is giving same level of satisfaction. So it could be an apple and an orange, a grape and orange. So all these commodities in pair of two giving equal level of satisfaction or equal level of utility to the consumers. So this rate can be measured with the help of marginal rate of substitution. So wherein based on the marginal rate of substitution, it can be said that it refers to the loss in satisfaction due to a reduction in one commodity, which is compensated by the unit gain in another commodity. So here they are saying that if I'm having 5 chocolates and 2 say fruits, any of the fruit, say apple, so I have to give up 2 or 3 chocolates in order to get 1 extra fruit. Okay, so this was just an example. We'll go in that detail. So here we'll be looking at indifference curve, which is the various combination of two commodities that gives same level of satisfaction. So in the IC curve, there are how many points are there? So if there are 3 points, then all the 3 points would give same level of satisfaction. That is the most important point here, and it is measured based on the MRS, that is marginal rate of substitution. So the formula of MRS is given here, that would be loss in Y divided by gain in X. So we can further see with the help of an example. So here we can see biscuits are given and bananas are given. So actually this one should be good X and this would be good Y. And based on that, we can see the example that would be, so good X is given 1. So this is good X on the X-axis and good Y. And so 1 is given here, the good X, and based on that, good Y is given 12. Okay, so this would be point A. Okay, here we have point A. Based on that, we can measure all the points A, B, C, D, and E. And the locus of all these points is known as IC curve. Okay, so we'll be looking at all these combination. So as we had mentioned earlier, there is combination of two commodities and all these points. So that is point A, B, C, D, and E. All these points are given same level of satisfaction. So based on that, we can see here that earlier there are 12 units of bananas and only 1 unit of biscuit. So in order to consume more units of biscuits, the consumer will reduce the consumption from 12 to 8, and here based on that the consumption of biscuits would increase from 1 to 2. So here we can see the difference is 4. So and here the difference is 1. So thus, we can say that in order to consume 1 extra unit of biscuit, the consumer is ready to sacrifice 4 units of bananas. Okay, so here sacrifice is being taken place, and here there is gain in another commodity. Okay, and okay, so we'll see this example as well. So here we can see 3. So he's sacrificing 3 bananas in order to attain 1 extra unit of biscuit. Okay, so the consumer will be sacrificing a commodity in order to receive more of another commodity. That is given here based on the example. Okay, so now then moving on, we'll be seeing the properties of the indifference curve. So majorly the indifference curve properties as well as the assumption and the diagram would be important for the exam point of view. So here we can see first all the properties. So if a good satisfies all four properties of so if a good satisfies all 4 properties of indifference curve, the good is referred to be an ordinary goods. Okay, so here there are 4 points that has to be mainly focused. One is IC never crossed. So we'll be looking into detail, but I'll just show it with the help of a diagram. That would be here. Yeah. So this being IC1 and IC2. This scenario will never happen. And IC will always be like this. So this would be IC1, C2, IC3 and IC4. So based on that, the ICs keeps on increasing, and the point level, or based on the budget line, if we see, so based on that, if we see the budget line, a person would be able to consume only this point, so this being the maximum level, and he or she might get maximum utility from these points as well, but then they may not be able to consume it because it is out of their income level. Okay, so this was just a rough idea, and basically the first property being IC never crosses. So an IC figure would never look like this. It will always be like this. Okay, second, farther it is from the origin, the higher the level of utility. So as shown in the above diagram, an IC will always be increasing. So this being point A, point B and point C. So here point A will give the maximum level of satisfaction, and further it is from the origin, the higher the level of utility. So this would give the maximum satisfaction. So here we can also see monotonic consumer. So an example for that is, suppose being, if a consumer is consuming level 8 of Y good, and similarly say 2 of X good. Moving on with the when shifted to the next IC curve, it might shift this way and might get, so point Y, that is 8, would remain the same, but X would increase to say 4. And here if we look, it might again increase, touching the IC curve, and here we might get 6. So what we can say here is, based on good X and Y, the X keeps on changing. So here we have 2 and 8, then we have 4 and 8, then we have 6 and 8. So the Y everywhere remains constant. It is only the X that keeps on changing. So definitely a consumer who would receive 6 and 8 would go for this unit instead of getting 2 and 8, right? So a consumer would always prefer the ones which are far away and would give them maximum utility. Then third one is IC curves slope downwards. So even this is based on the example that I had given earlier, that they have to sacrifice 1 unit in order to consume more of another unit. So we can always see that downward sloping. And the last one being indifference curve assumes a convex shape. So when a graph is like this, it is called convex. And when a graph goes like this, it's concave. So here it is not there for our study. So mostly we would be taking this into consideration, and we have to remember that IC curves are always convex. IC curves, the slope is downward sloping. That would be based on the MRS. Then it is the higher the IC, the higher the level of utility, and the IC never crosses. So these are the main points that we have to remember regarding the properties. Moving on. So here the explanation for each property is given, where we can see the first one being indifference curve has negative slope. Why does it have a negative slope? Because it denotes if the quantity of one commodity decreases, the quantity of another must increase, as shown in the diagram before this, and one decreases and the other one increases. Okay. Next one, the further away it is from the origin, the indifference curve lies, the higher level of utility that we had discussed earlier as well. And then the third one being that the indifference curve do not intersect. It is same as earlier the diagram that I had shown. And the fourth one is the indifference curve are convex to the origin. This implies that the slope of an indifference curve decreases as we move along the curve from the left towards the downwards to the right, and the marginal rate of substitution keeps on diminishing. So those were the four properties of indifference curve. Now moving on to the assumptions of the indifference curve theory. We have the first assumption, that is rationality. So these questions are not to be written in brief or anything, but if they come in MCQ type, you have to remember what the properties are, and there might be certain questions wherein there might be a wrong property given, and we have to identify which are the wrong ones. So it is necessary to know which are the real properties of indifference curve and the assumptions as well, so that we can figure out which one is the wrong or which one is the right one in the MCQ given. Okay, so first assumption is rationality. The consumer is assumed to be rational. So as mentioned in the earlier class, you can just refer to that video as well, that what does a person being rational mean? That means given his income and market prices, he is assumed to have full knowledge regarding the commodity that is being purchased. He has all the relevant information and he attains maximum satisfaction always. So that might not be a case in the real world. Real world, there might be many other factors that might affect a person, but then here the assumption given is rationality, first one. Second one is utility is ordinal. So we had seen the difference of cardinal as well as ordinal, wherein here it is measured based on ranks and cardinal based on numbers. So I had also given an easy way to remember cardinal, that was cards, and so it has numbers, we can remember based on that. So here the second assumption is utility is ordinal. So it is taken as an axiomatically true that the consumer can rank his preference. So he can rank according to the satisfaction he receives from each basket, and only ordinal measurement is required. So he cannot number the baskets or the level of satisfaction he gets. But he will be ranking it accordingly. So 1, 2, 3. So based on his preference, he'll be ranking each basket. Okay, moving on. The diminishing marginal rate of substitution, which we had mentioned earlier, that with sacrificing one commodity and getting or gaining more of another commodity. That is, preferences are ranked in terms of indifference curve, and it is convex to the origin. And the fourth one is the total utility of the consumer depends on the quantities of the consumer's commodities that each consumer has consumed. Okay, so we already saw uh, four assumptions. That is, first one being rationality, second utility is ordinal, third is diminishing marginal rate of MRS, that is marginal rate of substitution, and fourth one is the total utility depends on the quantities consumed by the consumer. Then fifth one is consistency and transitivity of choice. So this is one of the very important assumptions that we can see in the earlier examples as well, and in the upcoming classes as well, we'll be discussing regarding this, where the consumer is consistent in his choice. So if he chooses bundle A over B, then be it any situation or any condition, in different conditions, he would never choose B over A. He would only give preference to A, and he will remain consistent. So that is the concept of consistency. That so if I like say Kit Kat over Munch, so even if I'm getting Munch at a lower rate than Kit Kat, I would never prefer Munch, and I would only prefer Kit Kat over Munch. So that shows the consistency. Okay, then the second thing is the transitivity. So the transitivity can be shown as if A is preferred over B and B is preferred over C, then we can assume that A would be preferred over C. So explaining it in the form of an example or real world thing, that if I prefer Kit Kat over Munch, and if I prefer, say, Munch over Dairy Milk, then be it any condition, I'll be preferring Kit Kat over Dairy Milk as well. Okay, so this scenario has to be taken into consideration, and based on that, we can remember the transitivity theory and the consistency theory. So in consistency, A would always be chosen than B, and in transitivity, if A gives more satisfaction than B and B more than C, then A would always be more than C. So that is the theory of transitivity. So those are the five assumptions that we have seen of indifference curve. Now moving on, we'll be looking into the equilibrium of the consumer. So there we don't need a slide, so I'll just switch. We have covered what the definition, then the properties of indifference curve, the assumptions of indifference curve. Now we'll be looking into the equilibrium of the consumer with the help of the indifference curve. So what is an indifference curve? We have already seen. So again, we can look at the definition that shows indifference curve is the locus of points. As we had seen earlier, it moves like this, and there are many bundles of or baskets of goods based on the preferences of the consumers. So locus of points, particular combinations or bundles of goods that yield same utility or same level of satisfaction. So a consumer is always indifferent. So the word itself shows that the consumer is indifferent. So that's why it shows, or it is said to be indifference curve. So with the word itself, we can say that he's not different, or he's not differentiating each good. He is indifferent between each bundle of goods. So he can choose either A or B. It would give him the same level of satisfaction. So he can choose any of those. Okay. Then we have an indifference map that shows all the indifference curves that rank the preference of the consumers, and the combinations of goods situated on indifference shows same utility, and higher the IC, higher the level of satisfaction, lower the indifference curve, lower the utility. So we have already seen that with the help of diagram. Moving on. So this would be the equation that would show MRS of X and Y, two commodities, is negative dy upon dx. So as I had already mentioned, the formula that would be as shown in the first slide, that is the MRS is loss in Y divided by the gain in X. So based on that, we can remember this thing as well, that is minus dy upon dx. So that shows the slope of indifference curve. So how much reduction is there in Y commodity? Based on that, we are gaining in X commodity. Then we can also show the indifference curve as well as the budget line. So here we can estimate that the points A and B, that shows the budget line. Yeah, so here we can mark this as IC1, this being IC2, and this will be IC3. So based on that, we can normally say that IC3 would give the maximum level of satisfaction, right? So, so in the earlier cases, we told that the higher the IC, the higher the utility received by the consumers. But in this case, is it possible? So here it is not possible because the budget of the consumer is given A and B. So this would be the budget line of the consumer, and at that point it lies IC2. So the budget lies on so the IC2 lies on the budget line, and thus we can consume only till that level and we cannot go beyond that point. So I can say an example being, suppose I prefer say Ferrari or any other car, BMW or anything. But if my budget level is still here, that would be till Creta or something, I cannot go above that. Even though that might give me maximum level of satisfaction, I have to see my level of income as well, right? So based on that, this would be the level where it satisfies my utility as well as it satisfies the level of income that I receive as well. Okay, so based on the budget line, we will be estimating the IC like this. Okay, so next, moving on. Okay, so here we'll be looking into the derivation of the demand curve using the indifference curve approach. So this is a very simple concept. If we understand, it's very, very easy. And based on that, the explanation can be done. So first one being the graphical derivation of the demand curve. So here I've written it as well so that it is easy for you to understand. So first we have the budget line, that is A and B. Okay, then suppose we are just assuming that the price of commodity X falls. Okay, so this is commodity X and this is commodity Y. Okay, so the price of commodity X falls and the budget line of the shifts to the initial to the right from the initial position AB to the new position AB dash. So this was the earlier consumption point AB budget line. Then as the price falls, the budget line would shift and it would be A to B dash. Okay, so now due to the increase in the purchasing power of the given money, income of the consumer. Okay, so what is the purchasing power? So as the price falls, the income level remains the same. So the consumption or the buying level that of a person, that would be the purchasing power of the person. So the purchasing power of the given money income would increase definitely, right? So with more purchasing power in his hands, the consumer can buy more of X. And thus, the new budget line is tangent to the higher indifference curve. So earlier we can see this was IC1 and this being IC2. As the budget line shifts, we also shift to IC2 and the equilibrium point becomes E2. Okay. So then continuing the same point, we can say that the new equilibrium that is shown would shift, right? So earlier the equilibrium point was E1 and it would shift to the new IC, and so the equilibrium point would also shift to E2. And if we allow the price of X to fall continuously, so if it is falling again, so earlier it was here and then if X or the price of X falls, we shift to B dash, and again if it again continuously falls, then we'll also again shift to B dash dash. And so we'll be moving on to a higher IC curve as well, and the equilibrium point also shifts. So at point E1, the consumer buys X1 and X1 at price Y1, and at X2 and at E2 we can see he buys at X2 and Y2. So the quantity demanded has also increased. Now here we can see the based on the compensated budget line. So earlier we had already seen that the budget line was AB and B dash when the price falls. Right, so it shifted to B dash. So now the purpose of the compensating variation is to allow the consumer to remain at the same level of satisfaction as before the price change. So here we can see that the consumer is again shifting to point E1, but it remains on the same, so earlier level of IC. So we'll be moving on to IC1, and but the budget level would be in between. So here we can see the shift that is happening here. This would show the substitution effect, and the shift that is happening from here, this would show the income. So this would show the income, and on the other side this would show the substitution of the consumer. I'll just explain it again. So here we can see that the movement from point E1 to E-1. So this is E1 to E-1 we are shifting, shows the substitution effect. So this line shows the substitution effect, and the consumer buys more of X now than that it is cheaper substituting Y for X. So here we can see that consumer would be buying more of X, and there is a reduce in the quantity consumed of Y. So he's substituting Y for more of X. So that shows the substitution effect. And on the other hand, the consumer has a higher purchasing power. And if the commodity is normal, then he'll be able to spend some of his increased real income on X, and thus moving from X1, X-1 to X2. So from this point onwards, as the purchasing power increases, he would shift to X2, and thus this area would be shown as the income effect. Okay, so here we can see that the point has shifted from this to this level, right? So this level can be shown with the help of the income effect. So we have the price effect that is further divided into two, being the substitution effect and the income effect. So the income effect of a price change is negative for normal goods, and it reinforces the negative substitution effect. So that's it about the indifference curves. So we'll just summarize what we have looked in this class. That is, first being the ordinal utility given by Professor Hicks, and thus it is known as Hicksian approach. In the definition, two important points are various combination of two commodities and same level of satisfaction that the consumer receives. The formula of MRS, that is loss in Y divide by gain in X, and with the help of an example we can see here. Then we have four properties. First one is IC never crosses. Second, as it is away from the origin, the higher would be the utility. Third is it slopes downwards, and fourth is IC has convex shape. So the explanation of each property is given, and then we move on to the assumptions of the indifference curve. That is, first one being rationality, second utility ordinal, third diminishing marginal rate of substitution, fourth total utility depends on the quantities that the consumer has consumed, and fifth one is the consistency and transitivity of choice. Then we moved on to the equilibrium of the consumer, where we saw certain points and the equilibrium based on the budget line as well. So then we moved on to the derivation that showed the price consumption line that is a locus of all the equilibrium levels E1, E2, and E3. Then we have the price effect that can be shown with the help of income effect and substitution effect. So that's it in this class. Thank you.